Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassidy Wiley, and today I'm going to be sharing my reflections from an interview that I conducted with a man named Joey Weber, who is a licensed geropsychologist who works in an assisted living facility in Henderson, Nevada. Joey holds a master's degree in clinical psychology, and he works directly with older adults to support their mental and emotional and behavioral health. The interview gave me a very powerful look into what it's really like to work in assisted living, especially from a psychological perspective. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be walking through the 6 questions that were asked, and then I'll share some personal reflections on what I learned from the experience as well. So Joey Weber, he is a licensed geropsychologist with a master's degree in clinical psychology, and he specialized postgraduate training in working with older adults. They work full-time in an assisted living facility where they provide therapy, mental health evaluations, and support for both residents as well as staff. Joey, he described his job duty as a blend of clinical work, collaborative, and advocacy. And he described a typical day to involve meeting one-on-one with the residents for therapy, conducting behavioral assessments, as well as consulting with nurses and care staff to address issues like depression, anxiety, dementia, and emotional adjustment, as well as many other mental health concerns. They also provide support to family members, especially adult children who may feel guilty or confused about placing their loved ones in assisted living, which often happens in those situations. And Joey's role in that is to make sure that the residents feel heard, supported, and respected in that stage of life. When I asked Joey what he found the most fulfilling in his role, he said that it was mainly witnessing the emotional, really, transformation of the residents, especially those who come in withdrawn or really hopeless. Just having someone to listen can make really a big difference. And he talked a lot about helping people reconnect with meaning, dignity, and even as they age and, face that decline. He also mentioned how humbling it is to walk alongside those people during their final chapters. And he said it's really emotional and it's also really hard as well. And then I asked Joey about the challenges that he faces, and of course he said they are very real. And oftentimes we don't think about that in assisted living facilities. Joey said that the emotional toll of the job is really one of the hardest parts, especially when they form close bonds with the residents and then they have to grieve their loss. Another challenge is managing behavioral symptoms in residents with dementia or mental illnesses, especially when some of those symptoms include a lot of aggression and paranoia. He said it requires a lot of patience on his end, sometimes creativity, and a lot of times teamwork as well. He also mentioned that mental health professionals are sometimes really underrepresented in assisted living facilities, which means there is a constant need to advocate for more support and more resources. Then I asked about professional growth, and he explained that to continue growing professionally, he often attends workshops and continuing education seminars, especially focusing on aging, dementia, trauma, and a lot of therapeutic techniques. He also participates in peer consultation groups with other psychologists as well. And he explains that this helps him often to avoid burnout, which can happen a lot with mental health professionals. And it also helps him to stay current in his field as well. And then I asked him what kind of advice he would have for students. And when I asked him this, for someone like me, he said considering a career in psychology or like any related field, he really encouraged me to look into geropsychology. He said older adults are one of the fastest growing populations who are in need of care, but they're often really overlooked. He also emphasized the importance of strong listening skills, and that's really important in any field that you go into, as well as the ability to observe subtle changes in behavior. And most importantly, he said he advised setting emotional boundaries, which is important as well in any other field, and having a strong support system so that you can keep doing the work without losing yourself in it. My personal reflection. This interview really was important to me just because it taught me so much more than I expected it to. And before this conversation with Joey, I mostly thought of assisted living in terms of physical care, helping residents with daily tasks and such. But Joey really opened my eyes to how essential mental and emotional care is as people age. I was especially moved when he described the work as sacred, and due to my beliefs, I really resonated with that because of my Christian beliefs. And that word just really stuck with me throughout the interview. And it reminded me that psychology isn't really just about diagnosis, which a lot of people can make it that way. It's about human dignity and healing and just showing up for people in really vulnerable moments for them. One thing that also resonated with me was the idea that what people don't say is often just as important as what they do say. And that's something that I want to carry with me as I continue studying and eventually begin working with clients, whether it's as a future lawyer, as an advocate, or as a mental health supporter. I also gained a better understanding of how interdisciplinary this field is. You don't just work alone, you really collaborate with nurses, social workers, families, and even the residents themselves. It's really a team-based environment, and it sounds very challenging, but stuff like that can be really rewarding as well. I just want to say thank you guys so much for listening to my interview reflection. I hope this gave you guys some insight into the incredible work being done in assisted living facilities and maybe even spark some interest in this job in the future. Yeah, thank you guys so much.